It's absolutely entirely possible to profit from the weather.
My name is Michael Agnew. I'm an independent trader. Trading commodities at the CME Group, member of the Chicago Board of Trade, and have traded derivatives and futures cash for over 15 years. Weather derivatives are financial instruments that firms would use to hedge risk concerned with adverse weather conditions. The first weather derivative was originally traded by Enron back in 1997. Weather derivatives started in 1999 at the CME Group. Big utilities, reinsurers to hedge against hurricanes or tornadoes or flooding, some sort of catastrophe, hedging against a cooler summer or a warmer winter. Let's just say I was insuring a product for $5 million, no matter what it was. Let's say if I was a utility company, a farmer, whatever it was. Let's say I had $5 million worth of crop, but I can do derivatives that are worth double that amount, and I can control the effects to where I collect on the insurance that's worth $10 million as opposed to selling the crop for $5 million. Yes, I could definitely profit from that. 2010, 2011, Southern Illinois, Missouri, those, we had a high peak of tornadoes and those types of adverse weather conditions definitely raised the price of commodities as well as drove the volatility, which also raises the price of commodities. You're gonna make more money if a crop fails. You're creating insurance that's over the price of what your crop is worth, let's say. So if you can control the weather, you control how these products grow. And if you had an insight to how these products were actually seeded and what products you use to actually grow those items, corn, soybeans, and you can control that market, it's unlimited profit potential if you can control the weather.
If you want to send cold into the Midwest, you buy up pipeline capacity, you buy up options on heating and cooling degree days, you buy derivatives off of rainfall. There are mechanisms that you can make hundreds of billions of dollars annually and defray a huge chunk of the cost of this just on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, playing with derivatives in the weather market.
Weather derivatives are basically, you're betting that there's going to be a weather disaster, and you're betting that it's going to occur within a particular time frame in a particular location, and then the money that you put up basically is like a bet. It's like a wager, saying that this incident's going to happen here, and then when it does happen, there's a big payoff. And that big payoff is something that motivates people to continue to participate in this kind of thing and maybe even feed the very process that's causing the bad weather to happen. Particularly if there's a connection between the people that are seeding the clouds and the people that are making investments.
This is a new opportunity. It's a new tool for investors. Even if someone has no interest in, going on the offensive side and buying things, it definitely behooves them to be aware of what's going on out there. The extreme weather is here, and it's not going to reverse itself. The weather event has to be severe.
Ionospheric heating, in fact, these instruments, when they were first utilized, which is in the former Soviet Union back in the 70s, they started out then, they still call these ionospheric heaters because in one mode of operation, you can literally create above this instrument on the ground, you can heat an area up to 30 miles in diameter in the ionosphere. So you heat it up, and by heating it, it literally raises it. So then imagine this column moving up several hundred kilometers out, and then the lower atmosphere begins to rush in and fill that vacant space, that void. And as a result, you're altering pressure systems for quite a distance, which of course alters the weather. You're also able, if a jet stream is coming in the air, you're able to alter its course. And if you alter a jet stream, even a small amount, then the swing factor on the other end, you can move it. So you're moving storms, say, out of the Midwest onto the East Coast, or this kind of thing, by just swinging it high in terms of its flow and getting it redirected.
Okay, so now if we look at precipitation, much has been made of this issue of damage from precipitation.
Which the particulates that these trails have introduced into the sky are, let's just say the storms can develop more violently, more quickly, in places that are not necessarily as where you would expect them to be. And so we see more flooding, we see more intense droughts, We see rainfall rates of 1 to 2¼ inches an hour that are just bizarre, and sometimes even rainfall 1¼ inch a minute is just unheard of.
And so you have an area that's already been heated by the sun's rays, and then you have the aerosol drift in over that area, and it's reflecting both ways. It's reflecting the heat of the sun back out, but it's also trapping the heat that's already been created there by the sunlight. So it will actually create more heat and trap heat inside and closer to the atmosphere. It can actually exacerbate global warming problems.
And if you become more aware of what's happening, where the global commodities are, what extreme weather events, you're one step ahead of them.
The nature of the risk and our ability to respond to the risk is much greater in the case of the scenario that might involve large-scale regional agricultural disruption lasting a number of years.
So the agenda was drought. The agenda was to kill the storm, at least in that one particular spot.
You see a tremendous and significant loss of property and crop production. Many times this will cause farms to go out of business, and when farmers go out of business, they usually have to sell, and then if there's somebody waiting in the wings to buy their land and then turn that land over to the production of genetically modified crops, you can see where there would be kind of a strategic advantage there.
There's something that happened in the Midwest, and I'm sure everybody's heard about the flooding in the Midwest, and what happened is George Soros and his big corporate monolith went in and started buying up the farmland. So not only is it creating all these stresses, it appears to be a corporate land grab. In other words, when the farmers, the small farmers, go out of business, they're wiped out through these droughts and everything, then the big guys come in, buy up the land.
And if you think of Western history, there's a lot of it concerning water rights and even water wars. And so they were shooting about access to water to water your livestock. And now people are thinking, or at least the people who are involved in weather control sometimes think about the river of moisture above our heads, and geez, if we could just tap that. But that too is a water right that would involve access to people that felt that maybe they had prior rights over it.
You're reducing the food security of people through deploying these kinds of approaches that
Potentially 2 billion people could have their food disrupted by such interventions.
I've been an organic farmer my entire life. And I've been, in the last 8 years, been certified organic. And so I've been growing food in a way that feels healthy, where I have the most energy. And now it's not so healthy. I want to pass a really nice, healthy soil, rich soil, earth on to the children and have it be fertile.
My name is Joel Gil Coca. I've been farming in this land for about 5 years. Since 2007, and I'm certified organic since 2001. 10 years ago, when I started working for myself, we can grow cilantro, no problem. We can grow basil, no problem. We can grow Chinese cabbage without get trouble, or any vegetable. But 10 years after, 5 years after, that everything started declining.
Could you add some of the environment that affect a large population? The answer is absolutely yes.
I started seeing chemtrails being laid overhead more frequently and noticing the change in the crop production.
What we see in our area, anytime there's convective clouds, anytime there's a large cumulus cloud forming and beginning to rise, we hear aircraft in the vicinity, we see them actually flying over these convecting clouds, and then in a very short time, before those clouds generally will drop any precipitation, we'll see the entire cloud more or less dissolve into what looks like a massive smoke bank.
If you can control the weather, then you can control where the rain falls or where it doesn't fall. And if you can do that, then you can control whose crops survive and whose crops thrive. And if you happen to be favoring a corporation or a group of corporations that are flooding the market with genetically modified crops, you can see how manipulating the weather can actually change the market share that one or more corporations have. And there's lots of different ways that you can do it. You can do it by denying precipitation or by giving too much. You can cause, unusually large hailstones to come out of the sky and completely obliterate a crop of corn. There's lots of different ways that you can do it. Tornadoes rip up an entire town, like Joplin, Missouri, I think it was. If you look back at the tapes of those weather systems and you look 5 days prior to that, you'll see that in those days preceding those events, there was all kinds of aerosols being sprayed all along the California coastline, where the moisture for those storms came from, where those storm systems originated. It's insidious when you think about it.
Well, Mike, I've seen since the chemtrails have come, there's a direct correlation with the way the food doesn't look as healthy and vibrant, and less of it, and that concerns me.
And of course, all crop losses are related to weather modification problems, either climate, worldwide weather, or local weather, which is called microclimates. And these microclimates definitely determine what crop grows where and in which community. And so therefore, without stable microclimates, we cannot produce as much food for the rest of the world and ourselves as when we have a more stable microclimates, not only in the United States, but in other countries as well.
We fertilize it really good and they still have a lot of trouble to produce. And I think this is not fun because we're losing a lot of money put them into this kind of production. In 2008, 2009, 3 times I lost my complete planting of Chinese cabbage.
Weather events is one of the key components to most commodities that are traded. Let's just say your agricultural group, corn, soybeans, wheat, something along those lines. Weather is by far the largest affecting factor in the price of those commodities.
If one farmer's crop fails, we have a major crop failure, say in corn, now that's going to affect every other company that uses corn in their manufacturing process. There's going to be less of it. And anytime there's less of something, that creates a price rise. Demand rises, okay, because there isn't any of it. There's only one thing. You've got 5 people that want it, so they're going to pay more money for it. The companies know that, so they're going to hike the prices up anyway.
The consumer actually sees the big brunt end of the higher costs in the commodity due to the adverse weather condition. Obviously, the consumer will pay that price.
I've noticed that the rainfall is less predictable, and then when it does rain, it does rain periods of time that's more like longer periods.
So not only do we have the pollution, not only do we have stunted growth, but we also have changes in weather. And it's been severe changes in weather all across the globe.
I don't have a clue how bad they are, but I know they are affecting already in certain plants, like basil, cilantro, and sometimes the broccoli gets too much fungus. It can be from those things because no matter what we do, it doesn't fit. It's not working right.
It appears to be a fungally related ailment, and if one looks at the species extinction rate, which today is estimated to be 1,000 times natural variability, that's 1,000 times normal, a figure you'd think would alarm most reasonable people, which is 100,000% of normal, and 70 to 80% of that extinction, plant and animal, is related to fungal infection. Geoengineering particulates are known to proliferate fungal reproduction.
Abiotic stresses are drought, cold, heavy metals, excess moisture in the soil. And Monsanto has a patent that actually addresses all of those abiotic stresses. And the plants that it addresses is everything from apples to zucchini. 2011 was one of the worst years for things that create abiotic stress. They had 12 worldwide severe weather problems. This destroyed a good portion of the food supply.
Now I'm having a hard time growing cherry tomatoes outside under these conditions, and I've turned to having to build a greenhouse where I'm now growing large tomatoes, heirlooms, and they are producing really nice big tomatoes. I see that the tomatoes that I planted now are really healthy and the ones outside are dying.
The Midwest grows 40% of the world's corn, and it does have a tendency to flood. So we can expect more and more flooding. According to the statistics, the EPA statistics say that there's going to be more and more flooding.
Monsanto is one of the world's largest chemical companies. They also own 90% of the seed companies in the world right now, and they are the largest company putting out genetically modified seeds.
So what does Monsanto do? Corn is the lead-in because corn is in just about everything. Corn is the main crop. And Monsanto leads in with corn products before it does anything else. So what we have is Monsanto leading in with a drought-resistant corn and an abiotic stress-resistant corn. The drought and the flooding, it's all the same patent. Monsanto has a patent for abiotic stress. Abiotic stress is the drought, it's the flooding, it's the excess soil, it's anything that's going to stress a plant.
GMO is genetically modified organism, and it's also called GE, genetic engineering. Well, the history of farming has been a farmer will plant a seed into the ground. There will be nutrients in the ground that will enable that plant to grow. And then at the end of the growing season, they will take some of the seeds and they will save them for next year, and they'll grow their next crop. But what is going on with the genetically modified seeds is they're what's called terminator seeds. A terminator seed will not produce other seeds. With the terminator seeds, these farmers have to go back to Monsanto every single year and purchase these extremely high-priced seeds. There have been studies outside of the United States showing that genetically modified seeds, the plants that come from them, are extremely harmful to humans and other life on this planet.
When I started farming, I produced 100% my crops, but in the last 4 years, I've been declined to 50-75% if I talk into later crop, because I've been lost everything. And that's why I start moving all different crops so I can cover the loss.
Well, my food production has declined at least by 60% in the last, 10 years. I've noticed banana stalks are smaller, and certainly the tomatoes, I'm hardly getting any. I used to get bushels of tomatoes, and now I can barely get a bowl.
My concern, it can be, it's possible if we're going to run out of business if they continue doing that. They really need to stop it doing. That's all I believe, because we cannot change the system, the mother nature. We have to keep going the way it is. It's not possible.
On the other hand, heat stress is going to be one of the things, or thought to be one of the things, that might limit production of crops throughout the tropics. And so there are some questions of trade-offs of, if you think you're going to benefit many people and harm some people, how do you deal with this issue of equity, and what are the options for dealing with that?
A really interesting thing that I found is that the EPA has concluded that incidents of heat stress, drought, flooding, cold, any type of abiotic stress is on the increase. And loss due to that is going to double by 2030. Then you put yourself up as the solution. So when all of this weather comes and wipes you out, or you have a drought problem, oh, drought, we've got the seed for you. Here's our drought-tolerant corn just for you, and it'll solve your problems. Oh, by the way, you have to sign this agreement, this 40-page agreement, so that when you go ahead and plant these seeds, you now belong to Monsanto. The weather disasters seem to be directly correlated to an increase in Monsanto's sales.
So there will be the have and the have-nots. And one of the things that's being discussed under global geoengineering is which countries will be the haves and which countries will be the have-nots when that type of climate remediation is undertaken by many people at a certain level, mostly private corporations funded by the US government, they are hoping.
The fact that it's cheap isn't necessarily a good thing at all, as I'll come to in a second. The fact that it's cheap is part of the hard problem of governance. The fact that it's cheap means any small state or even conceivably individuals could do this, and that is a very dangerous thing.
There's only probably under $10 million per year, and maybe far less than that, being spent on geoengineering research. It's a mix of a handful of government grants and some private money, including support from Bill Gates.
Bill Gates invests in geoengineering. Geoengineering destroys crops. Monsanto supplies the seeds to replace those crops. Bill Gates invests in Monsanto. So Bill Gates makes a ton of money, Monsanto makes a ton of money, and the small farmer gets squashed.
Corn prices go higher because of a severe drought in this country, where 41% of the country, or the world's supply of corn comes from. So corn prices are higher, the farmer has more money, so what does he do? He buys fertilizers, which drives up the mosaic stock, or he could purchase genetically modified seeds from Monsanto.
You've got severe drought in Africa. In 2011, there was a severe drought. This is causing nothing but death. It's causing starvation, it's causing malnutrition, it's causing a severe water shortage. How do you grow anything without water? You cannot grow anything without water. So what does Monsanto do? They say, oh, we got a drought-tolerant corn for you. There's been an excessive push to get bioengineered crops into Africa. They look at severe conditions as an opportunity. They're disaster capitalists. Okay, so here you have farmers, and they've got flooding, they've got droughts, they've got everything that totally wipes them out. So what happens? Okay, if they plant it early enough in the year, they can go ahead and try and plant again. So buy more seed. Okay, buy Monsanto seed. So they're just raking up on that end of it. Okay, so if you can create enough weather manipulation, you can shorten growing seasons, you can create enough of that disaster, and you've got the seed supply, they've got to come to you.
Geoengineers have stated on the record that if global geoengineering was started, it could cause droughts in Asia and Africa. And they state that to the American public for probably obvious reasons. Why would they tell the American public that it could also cause droughts here? Why wouldn't it cause droughts here? There's nothing special about America and the geography here that would not have the same effect as Asia and Africa. If the atmosphere is filled with particulates, those particulates diminish and disperse rainfall. Period. There's too many condensation nuclei, so the water droplets do not combine and fall as rain. They simply adhere to those tiny particles and migrate further, and that's exactly what we see.
One of the suggestions about geoengineering has been that we genetically modify trees and plants. We genetically modify crops to be aluminum resistant, and this is ongoing at this time. And part of the geoengineering scheme is to say we're going to put all these chemicals and particles into our atmosphere, which is going to cause air pollution, water pollution, changes in soil pH, and could disrupt agriculture crop production to a great degree. So therefore, instead of saying that maybe this isn't a good idea that we pollute our air, water, and soils with the chemicals we're going to put into the atmosphere, which do come back down, there is a scheme abounding, which is happening right now, to modify some crops so that they are aluminum resistant to the types of chemicals and particles they're going to put into the atmosphere.
It's just going to get worse until the point where we're not going to be able to grow anything at all unless it's a Monsanto genetically modified, abiotic stress resistant seed.
The chemical companies and the genetic and Monsanto and all of these companies are working together to make us totally dependent on their products for growing corn or growing any kind of agricultural product or trees, whatever. We're going to corporatize not only where the rainfall goes and who gets it through geoengineering and weather modification schemes, but we're also going to say that these are going to be the only crops that are going to grow in areas where we're putting in toxic chemicals that are coming down and altering the soils.
One of the most basic things about human society is that we need food and water. And these are two of the things that are most severely dependent upon good weather. Rain at the right time of the year, sunshine so crops can grow, not enough sunshine and they don't grow, too much water, the plants die, not enough water, the plants die. All of this goes back to the amount of food that's available. So if you starve people, they will be vulnerable. They will be much easier to manipulate and forced to do whatever a government wants them to do. So if you control how much food there is, or its availability, through things like the weather, or using the weather as a strategic tool militarily, you can, dramatically influence what's going on in a country. And by doing that over and over again, sequentially through a region, it's possible that you can change the political spectrum over an entire region by doing this over and over again. Maybe even, do it over a much wider region, create so much instability that you're able to, come in and say, oh, we have these wonderful fast-growing crops, genetically modified, and this, you'll have something to eat in less than 3 weeks, and I imagine that, if you can control the food supply, that you can then consolidate the financial and the political interests of a country.
Could predicting the weather enable a group or specific entity to profit from that knowledge of knowing what type of weather or weather pattern will be? Absolutely. That's what all commodities are driven by. They're driven by predicting the weather, how the weather will be in a certain location, and that directly is correlated to the price of that commodity. Absolutely. There's no doubt.
While there are a number of agendas associated with these damaging programs, one thing's for sure, they can be used to control our weather and thus corporatize every natural system on the planet. This enables certain individuals to consolidate an enormous amount of both monetary and political power into the hands of a few at the expense of every living thing on the planet.
Just by definition, the geoengineering programs are a direct assault on the most elemental aspects of nature.
What we're doing when we modify the weather is we're changing the world's climate and we're changing the microclimates, and we are doing it.
There are things we can say for certain. There's a mountain of metal raining down on us. We are certainly breathing that metal.
We have documented from the computer modeling some unintended consequences.
If such a contamination is present, shouldn't we investigate? Shouldn't local agencies investigate, which they have patently refused to do?
There's no question that large-scale climate engineering is untested and dangerous. I would disagree quite strongly that it doesn't exist. I think that the capacity to do it in engineering terms most certainly exists, and that's part of the reason we have to think seriously about how we manage that.
We are breathing a mountain of metal, and that can't be denied.
If geoengineering continues and the weather manipulation continues and genetic modification continues overtaking, we're going to lose our ability to grow good, nutritious food. We are going to lose our ability to thrive.
I personally consider this ongoing toxic dumping into our atmosphere to be, along with nuclear radiation, the most dangerous threats to our health and to our environment.
We've seen UV scales go off the charts, which are a known consequence of geoengineering, ozone destruction. We've seen rainfall patterns disrupted in ways that meteorologists don't seem to be able to explain or predict.
The challenge that all of these weathermen face, all of them, whether they're aware of it or not, sooner or later they will be aware of it. And I went through a period after the epiphany of, how did I not see this sooner? How? I mean, seriously, I'm supposed to do this for a living. How did I not see this?
We have seemed to have lost our moral fiber and our ethical compass when we talk about that we all should live within an experiment that somebody else is conducting.
If you knew or could predict the weather at any given time, in any given area, then you control the fate of mankind and what they pay for everything.
Washington is not responsive to the average person. It's responsive to commercial interests, who can spend millions on campaigns now without restriction, who literally drive the policy making in Washington, D.C.
I guess I'm under the belief that you can't control the weather. You know, I hope someday we could control the weather.
Power becomes an addictive thing.
We're taking what the Creator has created, usurping His authority, and bringing it under the authority of corporations.
I'm worried that one person or one group would try to have that much leverage over the whole planet.
I don't believe that anybody has the right to play God, especially when they're putting particles and chemicals into the atmosphere, which there's unintended and consequences that are known.
We don't know it all. We cannot assume the role of creator without dire consequences.
This is not a good idea, and this is not a reason to take and do a test. The atmosphere and the earth belong to all of us. It provides the food we eat, the air we breathe, the water we drink, and no one should have the right to own it.
The biosphere is at risk from top to bottom. Though you have climate scientists calling for emergency geoengineering due to events like methane mass expulsion, which appears to be occurring in the Arctic.
It would have a significant impact on the way that we operate. Notice it also has enormous political, social, and economic implications.
And so we don't want to have some giant planetary oops, I mean capital oops, in which you have a loss of life.
It's much, much harder to actually figure out the environmental risks and effectiveness of these new methods than it is to cook them up.
They're creating an artificial environment to replace the natural environment.
Shredded ozone layer, global drought, toxified soils, poison populations. Don't these issues matter?
Affecting ecosystems in ways we've never been able before. The whole concept of literally playing God with the technologies we have at our fingertips today.
And however the climate changes, wouldn't we be better to let the planet react on its own instead of trying to play God?
It doesn't have any benefits to society at all. It doesn't benefit the plant, it doesn't benefit the farmer, it doesn't benefit the environment.
It's all about money, and weather is another form of commoditizing, a way the Central Command Group can commoditize another form of our life.
At least the EPA has stated that there is going to be more weather, and they're attesting it to climate change. Well, I agree. It's changing. The weather's changing. Now, the real issue is it natural or is it man-made? And if it's man-made, who's doing it? Is it the geoengineering guys?
That's what I believe as geoengineering continues, that whatever changes are happening to the planet, we will exponentially worsen those changes and poison everything in the process. And indeed, with the amount of metal falling on us, that poisoning appears to have been occurring now for quite some time.
Why are you spraying that stuff in our sky?
It's accumulating massive amounts of wealth in very few hands, and that's what they're trying to do in all aspects of these economies.
The money's not worth it. This is my future.
I encourage people to get involved in the projects they're interested in, whether it's this one or some other one.
To thrive, we need to organize locally, nationally, and globally to expose and stop this practice immediately.
Please quit free riding on our future.
But do what you can do, and I think that's really the answer for all of this, is recognize that there's a network more powerful than the internet. It's a human race, and we are connected in a way that's quite powerful. The fact is, acting on what we know to be right and true, doing something about what we care about that we can do.
Please tell everyone you know about this.
Bring this message to community meetings, demonstrations and other public events.
The work we're doing will provide cover for others to come out. And I'm most interested in whistleblowers.
Send this film to environmental, farm groups, media groups, ADD, Alzheimer's, asthma groups, and other organizations that would do something if they only knew.
Because we deserve a future.
And if you control the weather, you're going to control the planet. It's that simple.
Some people address this issue in fear. Some people address it in anger. I address this in faith. Faith believing that we collectively, as human beings, as humanity, have the power and the ability to stop these damaging programs.